What's up, world? I'm Cameron McKinney, and this is Pop Culture Spotlight, a podcast about the movie A Quiet Place Day One. Here's a quick synopsis. Sam, a hospice patient, is brought into the city only to find herself at the center of an alien invasion. The film stars Lupita Nyong'o, Joseph Quinn, and Alex Wolff. Standout performances. The best performance from the first Quiet Place comes from Emily Blunt, and they put her character in an extreme emotional situation. And the same can be said about Lupita Nyong'o in this movie, who plays Sam, a character wondering what she has to live for during an alien invasion. With these movies, you also have to get actors who are interesting without talking, and she is far and away one of those. Nyong'o is an Oscar winner for 12 Years a Slave and has only gotten better after that, and she's beyond brilliant in horror movies. It was insane how the Oscars ignored her performance in Jordan Peele's Us, and the fascinating aspect of Nyong'o's career is how little she's worked. She's lent her voice in big movies, The Jungle Book and the Star Wars sequels, and has been in the Black Panther movies where it's a supporting role, and because of her lack of projects, every time she's on screen, I and many marvel at how good she is, and I think she's benefited from the fact that she hasn't been in many movies. Yes, I want to see Lupita Nyong'o in more movies, but I can't dispute the fact that she's made the right choices, and this is another right choice by the actress. Other performers would have overplayed the fact that the character of Sam is dying, but Nyong'o plays it with subtlety and realism. It's a wonderful, understated performance. Nyong'o's next project is another voice role, The Wild Robot, with Pedro Pascal, Stephanie Hsu, and Catherine O'Hara. Before I talk about actor Joseph Quinn's work in A Quiet Place Day One, I have to talk about the cultural impact of a little show called Stranger Things. Currently, you have Maya Hawke in Inside Out 2, the highest grossing Pixar film ever made, and then you have Joseph Quinn, who off of that show has gotten A Quiet Place Day One, Gladiator 2, and is going to play the Human Torch in the upcoming Fantastic Four movie. And why am I only bringing up these two? Because it's significant that not only are the main stars of that show becoming famous, but even the actors they are bringing in later seasons are getting chances to be stars in movies. I just kind of find it funny how people seem tired of Stranger Things, yet the success of these actors have me believing the show is as culturally relevant as it's ever been. I think Maya Hawke has benefited from Stranger Things more than being the daughter of Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman. And I know that sounds crazy, but look at the opportunities the Stranger Things actors are getting. That show is insanely popular, and Hollywood has taken notice of that. Joseph Quinn in Quiet Place Day One is pretty good as Eric, but it's hard to talk about the acting in these movies because there's very little dialogue. I think these future big opportunities in larger films is probably going to give us a better view of who he is as an actor. He was able to give this movie what it needed. But let's be honest, can he become the first live-action Human Torch that is universally beloved? I know some people liked Chris Evans when he played the character. Fewer people liked Michael B. Jordan when he played the character. But that character has never been played in a really good movie. I'm really interested in the upcoming Fantastic Four movie. Pedro Pascal, big fan. Eben Moss-Bacharach, big fan. Vanessa Kirby is fantastic. But no one has been able to make a very good live-action Fantastic Four movie. I think it's going to be insane for Joseph Quinn moving forward if both of those movies hit in a big way. Like if Gladiator 2 lives up to the hype and then he's great in the Fantastic Four film, he is going to be given movie opportunities till the end of his career. I mean, he only needs one of the two movies to be really great, but imagine if both of them are great. And then imagine if he's one of the biggest reasons why. I mean, this is an actor to keep an eye on in the next few months, because you might not feel strongly about him now, but after the release of Gladiator 2, and then whenever Fantastic Four comes out, you might feel completely differently towards Joseph Quinn. So tell me if you've heard this one before. An upcoming filmmaker makes a small movie that gets a ton of notoriety, and his second film sees him joining a big franchise. That's exactly exactly what happened with Micheal Sarnoski with Pig, starring Nicolas Cage. But why this feels different is because this movie is able to still feel like a movie connected to Pig, which is about grief. In this movie, A Quiet Place Day One is about what does a person live for, and you can say it's an extreme situation, but it's handled with real care from the filmmaker and the actor. Sarnoski is a director who is rightfully going to be given a lot of chances to make the movies he wants to make. His next is a Robin Hood movie starring Hugh Jackman and Jodie Comer titled The Death of Robin Hood, and I'm excited because this guy is someone who has proven he knows what to do with existing IP. Let's talk about the architect of the Quiet Place franchise, John Krasinski, who blew me away with his direction of the first two A Quiet Place movies, and I got to be honest, I don't know how to feel about him and his career at this moment, and it started with his disastrous appearance as Reed Richards in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I just don't know what was going on there. I believed that he was going to make up for that appearance by playing Reed Richards in his own Fantastic Four movie. I even got myself to believe that he would be the one directing the upcoming Fantastic Four movie, and that's not happening. So I really don't know what John Krasinski thought he was going to get out of that appearance as Reed Richards, and no one left that movie happy seeing him play that character in such a depressing way. And I don't blame him, that's the studio's fault and the green screen of it all again. I don't blame John Krasinski. I just don't know what John Krasinski thought he was going to get out of that situation. That's why I believed he was going to show up in that movie, and then he was going to get his own Fantastic Four movie. And I wanted to see John Krasinski's Fantastic Four movie. I wanted to see him direct the Fantastic Four film, and that's not happening. So he loses, and that movie really lost, because that moment of that movie is maybe the worst scene in a Marvel movie ever. Then you have his first non-Quiet Place movie as a director, and that's this year's If, which is an ambitious misfire, which may be me being generous. I still believe in John Krasinski as a director. I think I'm more curious to see where his acting career goes from here. He's Jim from The Office, but is still able to do interesting things like Away We Go, It's Complicated, and Jack Ryan. I'm extremely interested in his next movie, the Guy Ritchie directed Fountain of Youth, which will see Krasinski co-star with Natalie Portman. As a director, I still believe that John Krasinski can become a Rob Reiner, Ron Howard type. And what I mean by that is former sitcom stars who become more well-known filmmakers. And I still think that's in John Krasinski. But again, If is just a real misfire. I didn't really like that movie. I get what he was trying to do. He was trying to make a real earnest movie, but then you don't have Ryan Reynolds star in a movie that you want to be sincere. I mean, that's Deadpool we're talking about. He doesn't make sincere movies in the year 2024. I think a lot of people are down on John Krasinski, and I can't blame them for being down on John Krasinski. I just can't fully get there because of his work in the previous A Quiet Place movies. He's so good as a director of those movies and the star of the first film. Like, it was just super impressive. It was super ambitious. I thought he was going to be on the level of Bradley Cooper, but Bradley Cooper was, with his next movie, Maestro, proved that he can make a really good movie outside of A Star Is Born. John Krasinski needs to prove he can make a really good movie that's not associated with A Quiet Place. And let me just say, I'm worried, but I still have faith. I do believe he is a good actor, but even more so, I believe he's a really good director. And maybe the issue with If is that he was the writer and director. Maybe he's not a writer-director. I mean, he was a co-writer on the first Quiet Place movie, and he co-wrote the second one as well, but maybe he shouldn't be the only writer involved in a movie moving forward. And maybe I'm being too forgiving towards that movie, and maybe I end up being wrong about John Krasinski, but I want to be right about John Krasinski because I love his work in the first two A Quiet Place movies. movies. I mean, this franchise really is the first horror franchise I've really connected with, and it has to do with the performances, but it also has to do with the themes of the franchise being about humanity itself. And I see similarities with it and other great dystopian movies, Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later and Alfonso Cuarón's Children of Men. What these movies have in common is, yes, the filmmaking is top-notch and the films are entertaining, but these are films that make you think about how you would react in these extreme situations. I'm far from the first person to say this, but really good performances in horror movies are super underrated. I mean, they never get Oscar nominations. I believe that Emily Blunt should have gotten a nomination for her performance in the first A Quiet Place 2. I thought Cillian Murphy was brilliant in A Quiet Place Part 2. I also think it's really possible that by the end of her career, the best two performances that Lupita Nyong'o gives will be in Jordan Peele's Us and A Quiet Place Day One. Her best work might be in horror movies, yet she has the Oscar for 12 Years a Slave. I think that's interesting. I'm not saying that's wrong. She definitely deserved an Oscar, but she also deserved nominations for these other performances, but she didn't get them because of people's biases towards horror. And it's not just against actors, it's also about filmmakers. I mean, what will it take for them to finally nominate somebody like Robert Eggers for an Academy Award? Will Nosferatu finally be the movie he gets an Oscar nomination for? There's probably a good chance it won't be that, because they'll only look at that as another vampire movie. The same thing with Ari Aster. Like, these guys are not getting Oscar nominations because they make horror films. Jordan Peele didn't get an Oscar nomination for Nope, even though it's one of his best films, because of the fact that it's a horror sci-fi film. Box office. Based on the fact that this movie, A Quiet Place Day One, has made over $220 million at the box office, there's probably going to be more Quiet Place movies on the way. There could be other prequels. There's definitely going to be a sequel that I imagine will be directed by John Krasinski. I definitely want to see the return of Emily Blunt and Oscar-winning Cillian Murphy. And as long as these movies attract top-tier acting talent like Lupita Nyong'o, they should continue to be made. A Quiet Place has proven to be a filmmaking-friendly franchise as well. John Krasinski with the first two films and Micheal Sarnoski with Day One, although Jeff Nichols was once attached to A Quiet Place Day One, and I really would like to see Jeff Nichols or somebody like that make a Quiet Place movie, although I am glad he made The Bike Riders instead. I do really like the idea of indie filmmakers coming in to make their version of a Quiet Place movie. I mean, I really want to see David Lowery make a film within this franchise. He's already made big movies like Peter Pan for Disney, but when you watch his film A Ghost Story, you can only imagine what he could do with a real horror franchise like A Quiet Place. I think this would be the perfect film franchise for David Lowery. These films are perfect examples of why horror dominates movies, because they make them for not super expensive amounts of money. I mean, this movie cost $67 million and has made $220 million. Now, it's not a billion-dollar franchise, but it was never aiming to be that. These movies know what they are, and they stay within that. They're contained. A horror movie only really needs one star to sell it, because people love seeing horror movies in movie theaters, and that's not going to stop anytime soon. I do find all of the talk about this being a prequel to be really interesting, because when we think of prequels, we think younger actor gets cast to play a character that was once played by an older actor. That's what we think of when we hear the word prequel. This isn't one of those prequels. No one is playing a character that has ever been played before. This is the franchise going with a clean slate. I almost think it's unfair to those other prequels to compare this movie to them, because this movie doesn't have those challenges that Star Wars prequels have, or X-Men prequels. Like, we don't have a history with any of the characters in this movie. We have a history with the Quiet Place franchise, but let's be honest, we don't have that big of a history. We don't have a decade-long history with it. The first film was in 2018. It hasn't even been around a decade. I think it's smart to do an origin story, to do a prequel, but I just find it funny if you put this on the list of the best prequels of all time, because I don't even know how to compare this movie to something like X-Men First Class. I mean, that movie had real challenges because of our history with those characters, of Patrick Stewart playing Professor X and Ian McKellen playing Magneto. I'm not knocking the film, I just think that it should be stated that this movie doesn't face the challenges of other prequels of the past. I think it's very good for the future of movies that there are newer franchises like this that are thriving in theaters, that each movie feels like it's getting bigger and bigger, that the quality isn't dropping, that they're bringing in newer actors and newer filmmakers to put their twist on it. I would almost compare what's happening to A Quiet Place to the John Wick movies. Now, I think the John Wick movies are bigger and more popular, but each and every time there's a new John Wick movie, you're kind of surprised of how much money it's making, because you didn't think that the John Wick franchise is as big as it is. And that's how I feel about the Quiet Place movies. I heard about this movie. I had no idea the amount of people that cared about this franchise as much as they do. But this is really how you establish a franchise, is each movie is just as good or better than the last one. That's how you make a franchise. That's the secret sauce to the John Wick movies. Oh, John Wick is great. John Wick Part 2 is great. John Wick 4 just took things to another level. Now, I'm not saying that A Quiet Place Day 1 brings it to another level, although I've heard some critics say this is the best A Quiet Place movie. I still think it's the first movie. That's the one I have the most nostalgia towards. I just think Emily Blunt is brilliant in that movie. I also think John Krasinski is great in that movie. Noah Jupe is really solid. Millicent Simmons. I just found that movie to me more shocking than this one. Like, that movie had some real shocking elements in it that aren't there in this one. But what is really special about this movie, A Quiet Place Day 1, is you don't even have to have seen the first A Quiet Place movie to like this movie whatsoever. You could go in walking in blind, seeing this as your first Quiet Place film and falling in love with the franchise, and then that gets you to watch the other two. That's how good Lupita Nyong'o is in this movie. She will get you invested in the entire franchise, and there aren't many third films of a franchise that can do that for you. And I have no reason to believe that the consistency of this franchise won't continue. Like I said, they could bring in newer and exciting filmmakers to make their own versions of these movies, or they could just continue to work with great actresses like Lupita Nyong'o and Emily Blunt. The filmmakers and producers behind these movies put real thoughts into where the story is headed, and clearly John Krasinski has been connected to each and every film. He's the director and co-writer of the first two. He has a writing credit on this one as well. He is the architect of this franchise, and despite what he's doing now or what he's not doing now, he deserves a lot of credit for that. There are two people involved in this movie who I'm really interested to see what their future in films look like, and that's Micheal Sarnoski. Again, I just believe he's a top-notch director already. I think he can make bigger and bigger movies. His next one is with Hugh Jackman, a Robin Hood movie. Many have tried and failed to make a Robin Hood movie. I expect he's going to make a really good Robin Hood movie. And then the other is Joseph Quinn. I mean, 3 blockbusters in a row. Young actors who've been given these kind of opportunities, I mean, sometimes they hit and sometimes they don't. I remember in the 2000s, Orlando Bloom was in everything. Lord of the Rings, Pirates of the Caribbean, Troy. And then he was gone. I'm really interested to see if Joseph Quinn can take advantage of this opportunity and solidify himself as a movie star. The last thing I'll say is Lupita Nyong'o still rules, and that I really want to see her star in another movie from Jordan Peele, preferably one co-starring Daniel Kaluuya and Keke Palmer. That's what the world needs right now. Those three in a movie together. Nyong'o did her best work with Jordan Peele. I want them to make another horror movie together. I want them to make any other movie together, please. It will most likely never happen, but could you imagine if Jordan Peele made a movie in the franchise A Quiet Place? It would be insane. Thanks for listening to this edition of Pop Culture Spotlight. I'm Cameron McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Thursday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I highly recommend you check out A Quiet Place Day One. Next week on the podcast, I'm talking about Lee Isaac Chung's Twisters, starring Daisy Edgar Jones, Glenn Powell, and Anthony Ramos. So tune into that and please rate, review, and subscribe.